And looking at the legacy of the Civil War, there are many things that are changed forever because of the war. First of all, it is forever decided that the power of the federal government is supreme. There would be no more talk about which had more power, state or federal government, like we had seen with so many different issues leading up to the Civil War. We see the extension of federal power. Anytime you see a war that is being fought, the power of the central or federal government will always expand out of necessity. Just to fight the war successfully, it had to. We see income taxes first used to help pay for the war. This is the first time that was done in our country's history. We see both sides are going to use the draft to build up their militaries in order to fight. We also see both sides suppress civil liberty. So these are all very common things that are going to come from this war that will change the United States. Economically, we obviously see the growth of war-related industries. You see here in this painting that there are women who are working in those jobs. So there again is another common trait that we will see in future wars as well. Any kind of war-related industry, making weapons, uniforms, all of that. So northern industry is going to grow a lot stronger during the war because they were the ones who are making the war materials. They already had the factories, so they benefit. However, the southern economy is totally destroyed and had to be rebuilt. Remember, their economy is based on agriculture, almost completely on agriculture. And remember, we talked about when Sherman marched through the South, he is going to destroy everything. He destroys not only their fields, he burns them. He is also going to destroy their homes. He destroys their railroads. So all of this had to be rebuilt because of that method of total war. And the fact that most of those battles were fought in the South. There are very few battles actually fought in Union territory. So most of it was fought in the South. The cost of this war is going to be heavy in many ways. First of all, just looking at the total deaths, there were 360,000 Union deaths, another 260,000 Confederate deaths. If you look here again, you notice there's more Union deaths, but they won the war. So how did that happen? Again, that just goes back to the fact that they had more men to lose. They had a much greater population than the South. In addition to those men who were killed, you had another 500,000 wounded. So the number of Americans, remember guys, Union or Confederacy, these are all Americans who are wounded or killed. So when this whole thing is over, it all affects Americans. This war cost about $20 billion. The entire amount of money that our government spent in the first 80 years of its history, this war, in a brief 4 years, this war cost 5 times the amount that our government spent in 80 years. So that is a tremendous amount of money. Wars are very expensive and have to be paid for in various ways. So this is going to be some of just the actual cost of the war, both not just money, but in the deaths and the lives of those soldiers as well. We see many changes in warfare. We see new weapons, like more accurate rifles. The mini ball, which was a type of bullet that was used that was more accurate and also could travel further. That's going to be another development. We also see the beginning to use of trench warfare. We have very primitive grenades that were used, very primitive submarines as well. Ironclad ships like the very famous battle between the Monitor and the Merrimack. These were two ships. One was a Union ship, the other a Confederate ship, and they eventually end in a draw because they could not sink either one. So imagine an ironclad ship is just a wooden ship that's going to be covered in iron that's going to prevent it from burning. That's going to be really important here, and it's going to be more durable as well. So that battle ended in a draw, but we see the introduction of new types of warfare. The lives of many Americans are going to be affected dramatically. The 13th Amendment is passed. This is what officially ends slavery, the 13th Amendment. We talked about the Emancipation Proclamation, but it's the 13th Amendment that actually ends slavery. When soldiers return to their homes, many of them, obviously, their lives are going to be altered. If they were wounded in the war, they may not be able to go back to their lives the way they had. They may not be able to farm anymore. They might have to find a different line of work. They may come home to a job that doesn't exist anymore. So really they are going to have a difficult time integrating back into their old lives. We see urban populations grow, those cities grow because people were looking for jobs. And you have many more who just pack up and move west for a fresh start, just for new opportunities. And unfortunately, many families were totally destroyed by the deaths of soldiers. There were many soldiers, and in some cases, you had whole towns. Their population of young men were wiped out by this war. Many families lost many of their young men. This will forever change those communities as well. Before the war was actually over, Lincoln began planning for the end of this war. And his plan was going to be very forgiving. He basically just wanted to bring everybody back together and start this whole process of unification. He wanted to bind the nation to heal our wounds. Unfortunately, though, just 5 days after the war was over, Lincoln was attending a play at Ford's Theater with his wife and some friends when John Wilkes Booth, who was a Southern sympathizer and actor, is going to walk in and kill Abraham Lincoln. He shoots him in the back of the head, jumps to the stage, and then flees. He is later captured and later dies after he is captured and he was shot. Um, but he dies, but he is going to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. So this is not going to allow Abraham Lincoln to fully play out his plan of unifying our nation. This was going to be key too because this is the first assassination of a president we had ever had. And it's going to be very difficult for our country to move past this. And we really see that Abraham Lincoln and his plan and what Andrew Johnson attempts to do with that plan after his assassination and how difficult it was.